Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf the Podcast, a serial killer drama.
Hello, Werewolf the Podcast, and your fun-loving, good-time werewolf is right here, right now, wildebeest. Yeah, she's back. Sally, in all her glory, has been saved by the Facebook group. I didn't kill her, and she is back. Hope that makes you happy, dear Facebook lunatics. The last episode had Will taken down a peg or two by the Nixies, a fun-loving species of water spirit that like to eat rotting human flesh. This week we continue, but from poor Mr. Patel's point of view. Go and check out all the social media links in the description. There's all sorts of things there. I keep up to date with most stuff when I remember to do so. And if you want some input into Will and Fenn's life, those are the places to go and contact me. My second book in the series about the werewolf is out and available on the Kindle as of the 7th of August. Fenrir Thorvaldsen has ghostwritten it for me. It is free for 5 days. If you want to grab it for free, that's right, for free for 5 days from the 7th of August. You know, Mr. Patel was a bit speechless, to say the least. He always kept his eyes on the hippies as they walked out from his shop. It was worrying. I mean, it's not the worst area in the world that the shop was in, but they were so naive that they could have been such easy targets, especially the way they were distracted by fighting with each other all the time. He couldn't understand that relationship that they had. How could they be bothered to fight all the time? Marjorie, his wife, was fun, and all they did was laugh when together, which wasn't frequently because of the shop, but these two just fought, and it was bizarre. He'd spent quite a bit on his security system after a break-in last year, and the cameras followed the couple as they sniped at each other and got to the car. Honestly, watching them was painful. Why be together if your life was like that? They got in the vehicle and slammed the doors. The anger that was displayed must have been exhausting for them, especially having to switch it on and off at a moment's notice. In the shop, they acted as though there was no one else in the world but each other. They held hands and asked each other lovely questions, and yes, dear, and no, dear, and oh, dear. As the doors closed, a shadow came to the passenger side rear door and climbed in to join them. Oh, fuck, thought Mr. Patel. He may lose really good quality customers if he doesn't do anything. He picked up his phone and watched the car. The couple had been alone when they arrived, and when they left the shop. They'd been alone. There was no one else with them. This had to be something shit that was happening. He had to do something. What was he going to do? I mean, he was closing in 20 minutes, and if he phoned the police, then he would have to hang around for them to do all their policing stuff, and that could be hours, and he was in at 5:30. It was a pain in the proverbial arse to do the right thing, to be honest, but at the end of the day, he was the right thing kind of person, so he had to do something for his own fucking conscience. What to do? Now, he could risk going out there himself, but honestly, they weren't worth that level of risk. The guy in the car may be a junkie with a gun. He might have a knife or something. He would pretend that the right thing to do was to make sure he was safe so that he could get the weirdo's help. That was the best thing. It didn't actually make him that much cash that he should actually allow himself to risk getting hurt for them. What to do? All these thoughts were going through his head as he watched the car carefully on the screen to see if he got any more clues about what was going on in it. If the hippies were just robbed, that would be okay. It was not as though they didn't have any cash, and these were the types to have, I'm sure, very decent insurance. They would definitely afford the therapy after to get over the PTSD that they would inevitably get, and it would give them another anecdote to add to their list for parties with their friends, wouldn't it? This was all taking a bit too long for this just to be a simple robbery. Maybe the idiots were arguing with the thief, robber, murderer, or possibly a rapist. Oh, shit. He hated himself for a moment for even thinking about that one. Rapist. Come on, give them your shit and get them out of there, please. He was just sick of the bad advertisement of people being robbed outside his shop. People would be scared to come if this kept happening. Shit. Doing the right thing is so fucking annoying. Mr. Patel was frustrated and angrily picked up his mobile, opened the lock screen and typed in 999. How long would he leave it? It was starting to take a little too long for comfort. He couldn't hear what was happening in the car, but a few people had recently been mugged in the vicinity, so he had to do something. Fuck it. He pushed the green icon for the phone call and grimaced as he felt the anxiety of what he was doing build. Well, I suppose I have to do it now, he thought. Police, please, he told the operator. As he was transferred, he saw someone else wander up to the now rocking car with what appeared to be a boom box on their shoulder. Yeah, that is definitely a boom box. The last time he'd seen anything like that was in 1986 when he and his mates used to walk the streets with those things on their shoulders with loud rap music blasting. He smiled at the memory of him and his friends on the corner spinning on vinyl floor covering that they'd stolen from the local DIY shop. The good old days when he thought he was going to be a famous rapper, not working in his dad's shop for the rest of his life. He was then MCRIP. How life could have been so different. Whoever they were, they must have been in cahoots with the carjacker standing there. Is that what you call them when they rob people's cars or in cars? No, those carjackers stole the actual vehicle when you're in it. That's how it worked, didn't it? Maybe that was what was happening. Who steals a Prius? The police operator asked the next of their specific questions. Yes, my location is Patel's store, KT17EH2. Patel kept his eyes clamped on the screen. He did not want to miss anything that was happening. Hopefully, this would all be over super quickly and he could get home without any incident or too much of a waste of time. As he watched, the passenger and the driver's car doors opened and two things burst out into the night. They were indescribable monsters moving much too fast and herky-jerky for him to be able to focus on them on the screen. They momentarily paused and faced the person with the cassette player on their shoulder. This made them suddenly all too describable. The creatures' mouths drew the eye and were open and full of fangs. They had massive fish eyes in what looked like, fish heads. Yeah, they were like fish heads, but not fish heads because they didn't have a separate head from their body and they had no neck. It all seemed to be one thing. It was a massive fish with legs and arms. Yeah, they had gangly, long, horrible arms that you could imagine like clutching at you and stuff. This was nightmare material. The speed that they moved seemed off as well. They looked like they'd been speeded up. If he was a more thoughtful person, he might have thought there must be something wrong with the CCTV system, but just now he could think of nothing else but that there were fish people with arms and legs out there. A decision had been made now. Fuck the hippie weirdos. Going out there and helping them was entirely off the table. And the person who was standing there now with the fuck off massive music system on their shoulder was obviously fucked too. They were going to be fish food. A somewhat inappropriate joke that he did find slightly amusing at that moment and gave him a second of respite from his stress. The figure did not seem too bothered by these things in front of her. Yeah, she removed her hood and freed her hair. She was She was definitely a she, and a particularly pretty one. God, this system was good. What detail. Mr. Patel was thinking other things as she took the music player off her shoulder and directed it at the fishy figures. They cowered away from her as she fiddled with something on top of the player. It must have been the volume or something. He wished he had sound on this CCTV to hear what was happening. The sound that was being made must have been awful, though, as the creatures backed away and held horrible hands to the sides of their heads. Did fish have ears? These things, well, they didn't seem to have any obvious ears, but they were holding something on the sides of their heads while shying away from the laughing girl as she put down the stereo and started to do a little wiggly dance behind the system. She can move. You had to give her that. It was a nice distraction from what was happening to the fishy figures, who were trying to strain forward towards her as though they were fighting through strong storm-like winds to get to her. It was a somewhat mad scene, and Mr. Patel was totally engrossed in the scenario. He'd totally forgotten about the phone in his hand. The creatures were being pushed back, and finally they broke and ran from the girl, who was now actively pointing the boombox at them like a weapon while dancing at them. The phone burst into life with the following question: what was the nature of the emergency? Mr. Patel had to think. He now watched the screen as the girl put down the stereo and gesticulated at the creatures that had disappeared from the picture. She was obviously giving them some sort of verbal and physical rebuke. "Sir, can you state the manner of the emergency, please?" was calmly reissued over the phone by a well-trained handler on the line. Was again Patel's only reply. "It's okay, sir. Just describe what has happened or is happening, please. Stay calm and we can sort it out together. I'm here to help." What the fuck was Patel going to say? What was he going to say? "There's a robbery happening outside my shop, I think," he told the operator. He did not think that if he told them the truth, they would take him that seriously. Honestly, he did not know what to think of what he'd seen. Fish people and pretty dancing girls. What had happened to the hippies in the car? What the fuck was going on? Well, he would get the police here as soon as he could so they could sort this shit out. It was certainly not part of his job as a corner shop owner to deal with shit like this on a daily basis. He usually just worried about the school kids from the local comprehensive nicking his energy drinks and the papers being delivered on time. Could you give me any more details about the robbery, sir? The number of people involved? Maybe can you see any weapons being used? Just stay calm, it's fine. We do have a car on the way with 2 officers getting to your premises very soon. 2 customers came into the shop," said Mr. Patel, and as they got back into their car, another man entered the car's back door. Then another person came up and stood outside the vehicle. I think that they were with the man who jumped in the car, I think. "Okay, sir. Thank you very much," said the operator. "Did you see any weapons? How can you be sure it's a robbery?" It's definitely something wrong. The customers, I mean the people who own the car, have run off. The girl who was outside the vehicle made them run away. She threatened them with I suppose it's a weapon. I think that the man who climbed in the car after he's still in there. This was all told sort of stuntingly to the poor police officer. "Okay. Did you see the weapon, sir?" No. But it must have been a weapon because she pointed it at them and they ran off," replied Mr. Patel. "Okay, sir," said the operator. "As I say, that the police are on their way. They will be there in a few moments. Make sure you're safe and secure and await their arrival. Can I get your name and details?" Yes, of course. I am John Patel, and..." He paused halfway into his sentence. The girl had just opened the car's back door and A big, hairy black thing had splashed onto the floor. The creature on the floor was shown in high-quality 4K detail. It was a dog-headed man thing that looked like it had been slightly butchered around the face. Is it a werewolf? What was going on? He'd been working too many hours recently. Maybe he was seeing things. Maybe those hippies that had come in had been like smoking something before they came in. It must be wacky backy that had this kind of effect on him, because perhaps he should really be asking for an ambulance to come and get him, not to sort out the stuff that's happening outside. He pressed the icon on the phone to cancel the current call and decided it was probably best not to look up at the screen anymore. It was probably best just to lie down below the counter until everything went away. Yes, that was the best answer. Not to have anything else to do with this. The phone started ringing, but he was in no mental state for him to answer anything at the moment. He put it on silent and just settled down on the floor, sucking his thumb as he'd done when he was a child and he'd required some comfort. Life was all getting a bit too much, and he could hear the sirens get closer as he lay there. He imagined his mother stroking his hair and her telling him that it was all going to be okay. It was all going to be okay, wasn't it? Fishmen, dogmen, weirdos and pretty women. He'd cracked. It had happened. I'd worked too many hours. The sirens got closer and closer, and there was a pause outside the shop as things happened beyond Mr. Patel's thoughts and eyes, and though he could hear things happen outside, he didn't pay much attention. The doorbell jangled and someone cautiously entered the shop, carefully calling Mr. Patel's name. He could hear the crisp crunch of voices over a police radio and decided to wait to be found. Eventually, after what seemed like an eternity, the gate of the counter was lifted, and a face peered around to look at him there. "You okay, mate?" said the voice. John stopped sucking his thumb and nodded. A few sleepless hours later, he was sat in an interview room at the local police station. He was exhausted and just a little bit confused. He had a coffee and a half-stale sandwich in front of him. He'd spoken to his wife that night and told her all was okay, but he hadn't told her the whole story. That would have to come again when he was ready to tell the whole story. She was opening the store for him today, and he considered that they may need to get away for a bit and have some time to contemplate his life. No one was supposed to see shit like he'd seen. He was ready to sell that store and go somewhere a lot nicer where he would not see monsters. Hopefully. I hear Dorset's nice. The door of the room opened and two people entered, a lady in a colourful hijab that contrasted with the rest of her clothing distinctly of the black variety, just her face, which was framed by pink satin. That face had a distinct look of concern, and she considered him in silence as she took her seat. The man, a bit younger than herself and smartly dressed with closely cropped black hair, sat across from him laying some papers on the table. Mr. Patel knew he would have to explain what he'd seen. He did not know what he was going to say. Could he tell them the truth, or would they think he lost it? That he'd seen those things. He had to get back to the shop and his wife. He couldn't get, put away in a loony bin. Otherwise, if he did that, then he wouldn't be able to work. "Hello, I'm Officer Johnson, and this is Officer Abdi. Before we begin, we've looked at the CCTV. We know you're sitting there trying to figure out what to tell us about what you saw. We can tell you what you saw was truly what you saw, mate. This is no wind-up, and there's no hidden camera prank happening. You saw what you saw. The two, let's call them fishy creatures, are things called Nixies, and they've been very well behaved for the past few years. They are..." He looked at the other officer, who nodded. They're water spirits. They tend to be a bit brutal and feisty, but they've agreed to do their damnedest to fit into human society as long as no one does anything to try and harm them. We've spoken to them this morning to get their take on what happened last night. They seem to like you, telling us that you're a particularly nice guy and stuff. He paused at this and opened a file that he'd dropped on the table and took a pen from the same file. He rifled through the papers until he found the one he wanted and, placing it on the table, turned it to face Mr. Patel. This is a form we would like you to sign for us if you wouldn't mind. It's kind of a legal thing to say that you'll not mention these things that you saw to anyone else but those of us investigating the situation. Mr. Patel looked down at the sheet. To be honest, it was a lot of words and he was not in the mood to do any reading. He was not going to tell anyone, was he? Who would believe him anyway? And seriously? This is all true? He picked up the pen and signed the paper without thought. The investigation is to find the others involved in last night's incident. We must look after our relationship with the fairy folks who were assaulted last night. I know it sounds very strange, doesn't it? But we need to sort this out. If we don't, then life may become a bit more complicated for the people on the river. It's important we don't bother them if that is the case. And then if we don't bother the Nixies, they don't bother us. Also, Nixies are very helpful in looking for things in the water, if you get what I mean, you know, dead stuff and other things, if you get my drift. He continued with a knowing glance. So, what we really need to know is anything about the werewolves that were there last night. We need to find them. Can you give us any information on their whereabouts? The man smiled and looked at the other officer. Whereabouts? Whereabouts is the werewolf, he laughed. After the interview, Abdi and Johnson were no more knowledgeable than before. Mr. Patel, bless him, had no idea about werewolves, who or what or where they were, those werewolves. It was a real shame about Mr. Patel. He seemed like a really nice guy. He should have had a solicitor read that form. Who knew where these people ended up? Thanks for listening. This is Will the Werewolf and Werewolf the Podcast, and we will carry on next week with this story. Let's hope that Mr. Patel ends up somewhere nice. Thanks for listening. Please go and like and follow and share and do stuff. That would be great. Love you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf the Podcast, a serial killer drama.